welcome to Lead Live, reminding you of your personal genius and how you think in order to actualize what you desire. Welcome. It's a pleasure to join you again. And if you happen to hear background noises, especially sirens, it's a reflection of the state of the times. Today is a very important day for a number of reasons. A lot is going on in our society. In addition to the coronavirus 19 pandemic, there's the crisis of conscience. There's a crisis of emotions surrounding the recent killing of an unarmed man, Black man, that really illuminates a historical set of realities for Black folks and for individuals of darker hue, people of color in general. When I was thinking about today's Lead Live session, I was thinking about you, all of us, and this remarkable society that we call California, that we call the Western region of the United States, that we call the United States, that we call the planet. I was thinking about all of us and our ability to lead with integrity and in transformative ways, even given the crisis. And as some of you know, and hopefully all of you will get to know, this Lead Live show is really about leadership excellence and achievement on demand. And so on a weekly basis, we have individuals selected because of their remarkable leadership, their investment in the community, their impact on our lives, to remind us of our capacity through the use of our mindset, a very productive, positive, aspiring, inspirational mindset, to be the change that we want to experience. So today we're very fortunate to have a gentleman who is director of our Oakland SPUR. SPUR is a regional policy group with 3 different locations in San Francisco, Oakland, and San Jose. And SPUR as an organization, and under this gentleman's leadership, it's really making a difference in terms of what we think about and what we actually plan for based upon what's codified in policy as it relates to transportation, housing, infrastructure, climate, a myriad of areas, all areas that affect us, not only locally, but across the globe. So his name is Robert. I call him fondly. This gentleman comes to us, he's local, like I am here in Oakland, yet he's local like we all are across the globe, and we're finding that we're closer and we're more intertwined and connected than we may have thought previously. And from my humble perspective, quite frankly, we're all one. And when we understand our interconnectedness, we are better positioned to make a profound difference. So in light of that contextual information, over the next less than 30 minutes, I'm going to ask Robert a couple of questions. And he's going to provide his learned feedback. Yet if you online have any questions, feel free to ask them of Robert, of myself, so that we can have this be an engaged session. But certainly, we want to be inspiring, we want to be informative, and we want to add value to your life in a way where you pay it forward. So without further ado, I'd like to welcome Robert on. Robert?
Elnora, thank you for having me.
Absolutely.
How are you today?
I am humbled and quite frankly, because of my value for authenticity, I've been crying off and on. And if you hear a bark in the background, that's my dog, Bosco. He wants to be on live too, but he's in the back. So I'm humbled by where we're at right now in our sheltered locations, especially because I feel very fortunate. I am sheltered. I have food. I have the ability to think, to function, and to increasingly numbers of us have less than what I am fortunate to have. So I'm humble. You? How are you?
I feel the same way. Very fortunate, but also disturbed at the state of the world and the state of the nation and the state of our city. And I was thinking about what I would say today, and know that I just have to be honest about that. There's not a clear and visible path forward in my mind that will lead us to where I want us to go. So I think we're in a struggle.
That's real. That's real. Yeah, we are. So as you think of the struggle that we're in, still a real talk. When you say we're in a struggle, what does that feel like for you?
Well, this is a country founded on ideals, which makes it different than many other countries. It's a country that has systematically failed to live up to those ideals. And it is a country in which that systematic failure, or pointing out that systematic failure, is considered heretical or controversial by many of our fellow citizens. And so getting people to understand the systematic nature of the failure is step one. And I don't know if we're any closer to that now as a country than we were when I was born. We seem to take a step forward and then we slide backward, and we take 2 steps forward and we slide back 3. And I don't know exactly where we are now. My younger son was counseling me yesterday that he thinks things have improved greatly in the decades since I was his age, and that they will improve greatly by the time he is mine. My age, and so I don't know if that's true. We're right in the thick of something now, but I see so much still to do, and so much failure to live up to what we can and should be.
Well, I think that's powerful that your son, and your younger son at that, how old is he again?
He's 16.
But
he thinks he's a grown-up.
Well, yeah, a lot of 16-year-olds are. And in fact, unfortunately, too many 16-year-olds are having to take on grown-up responsibilities. Yeah. And in a sense, we want that because we want them to think deeply and at a metacognitive level to be the leader that we need them to be. At the same time, we want them to experience what it means, just be light on their feet and enjoy being a child under the care of their remarkable parents. And unfortunately, too many don't have parents. But for those who do, I think it's humbling to know that your son has said to you and has counseled you as his dad that he is optimistic. And it doesn't mean that he doesn't understand what's going on, because I know your children are very intelligent young people, and not just because of their parents, but because of the nature of who they are, in addition to their parents. So I get a sense that in general, younger folks, maybe like we were when we were their age, full of a greater optimism. And so the question is, how do we as their elders, and I'm in my 60s now, how do we help them maintain that optimism as they struggle through, as they, in their own creative way, imagine a world where their hate is eliminated? That's not, I don't mean to be Pollyannish, but I mean to be real, where the systemic racism that pervades this society and more other societies outside this country are neutralized, at least, if not eliminated. Yeah. How do we inspire them to continue to do that? And then I want to get to those 2 questions that are specifically about business leaders, yet these young people will be our business leaders very soon, if some of them not now.
Let me come at what you were just saying. So my son Jason says to me that systemic racism is being eliminated. That's what he believes. He says, I don't see it, but that it is being eliminated, that his friends and the world he inhabits is much less racist than the world I inhabited growing up. And the world I inhabited growing up was much less racist than the generation before, and so on. And he cautions me to be optimistic. And he thinks we are doing it. He thinks with school curricula, he thinks with more people having friends of different races and marrying people of different races and living in cosmopolitan cities, that it is happening. It might not be happening quickly enough for my liking. So he's counseling me to be positive, and my pointing out the virtual repeal of the Voting Rights Act by the Roberts Court, my pointing out of the nature of current Supreme Court and circuit courts, notwithstanding, he believes we are doing it, at least in certain parts of the country. Elnora, I'm not so naive as to believe that systemic racism can be eliminated, but I do think through voting and electing the right sorts of people, it can be neutralized over time. I was a little bit dismayed to read Brother Cornel West's statements from earlier on the week, where he declared this country a failed social experiment, and he noted that we had a Black president, we had a Black attorney general, we had a Black secretary of state, and things are still the same. I would turn that back and say we've had one Black president who met with enormous resistance. We've never had a majority-minority Congress. And I point out to my son that he and his friends, as soon as they turn 18, must all register to vote, and must vote every single time in the primaries, in the special elections, must never, because the people who were marching in 1962 and 1963 and 1961 and being tear gassed, just like the people are now, they were marching for the right to vote. And it saddens me to know that many of those who are marching in our cities right now probably don't vote. And that's the tragedy. And I think we actually have tools at our hands to neutralize some of the problems. But I'll stop there and we'll get to your questions.
That's powerful. And the right to vote was fought for, people died for it, people were killed around it, and we're still fighting for the right to be 100%, to be treated and regarded as 100% humans.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
And let's not negate the fact that there are many individuals on this planet who are not treated in humane ways and in this country, and they're not Black and they're not people of color. They're what we call white, Anglo-Saxons, Caucasians, etc. So it's really a reflection of man's inhumanities to man. And I don't know, there's countless people who've said this, and that is, we hurt and then we hurt. So we hurt others when we're hurting. And the question is, how do we create, how do we inspire, how do we incentivize, how do we structure the kind of support to every individual where the hurt is neutralized and the love is maximized? That's a generic question that's at the
I have some reflection on that.
Okay, please.
And I think it's not complicated, really. A good friend of mine who you know moved to Australia a year ago, Elnora, and he and I speak regularly. And we had a long conversation on Friday evening about the state of the two different countries that we live in. He is born and raised in this country, but lives down there. And he says, Robert, I've been turning over in my head to understand why things are so different in Australia. And what I understand is that people in Australia are not desperate. They're concerned, they're worried about their families, but they're not desperate. And I said, why do you think that is? And he said, Because if you're unemployed in Australia, your unemployment insurance never runs out. And you've got health care. When you're sick, you know you can go to the doctor and it's not going to cost you anything, and you have an income. That sort of base insecurity about life and limb and ability to sustain yourself that I think gnaws at so many Americans. Does not gnaw at anybody in Australia. And they as a society have chosen to focus their national wealth on that, as opposed to what we've chosen to focus our national wealth on. It makes all the difference in the world.
Let's just take that in. It's powerful. As I transition to these two questions, I think our audience would really benefit from your insights, further insights. I'm mindful of what you just stated. And a little bit of a silence is invaluable in just taking that in. The first question I want to ask you is, as a tenured community development leader, working with CEOs and many other business leaders over 20 years, and during this time of crisis, what advice do you give to business and industry leaders to help them ensure the relevance and sustainability of their organizations?
Well, in my daily life, I try to keep things as uncomplicated as possible and keep my head as focused as possible. And I know what my mission is. I know what my organization does and doesn't do, and I know what I can do and cannot do. And I focus on those things and not get distracted from those things to the best of my ability. And to bring those things to bear on the crisis at hand. Yeah. So my organization, of which you are one of my outstanding board members, our mission is to promote good planning and good government in the Bay Area through research, education, and advocacy. And so the place seems to be falling apart. Now is not the time for research. Maybe now is the time for the education and the advocacy part. And so to that end, I hosted the mayor of Oakland on Monday night in a video town hall, ostensibly to talk about the budget negotiations that are going on now, but really to have an unfiltered hour and a half long Q&A between the mayor and all of those 100 and something plus people who dialed in. That is how I can, through the place where I sit, bring myself to bear and bring my organization to bear on dealing with the current crisis in a way that we can do better than anyone else. And that's what I think is really important. Know what it is you can do better than anyone else and do that.
And so how does one get to understand that? Let's say they've been leading an organization for years and basically spinning. Now the economy, because of the nature of the shelter in place and other impacts of COVID-19, they've not been able to invest and do what they've done historically to sustain their businesses. So how does being clear about their mission, singularly focused, not letting a lot of distractions get in the way, understanding their uniqueness in their unique niche in their industry, how do they do that in the midst of this crisis?
Wow, that's a yeah. You're asking about self-awareness and self-analysis of yourself and of what you do. That's a hard thing a lot of times. And I think that comes in listening and conversation. This medium that we're on right now it's a little bit flatter than I like. I can't pick up on people's body cues the way I do face to face, but boy, have I been using it a lot. And you talk to people and you ask, and you see how people react and what they react to. And it was interesting in our case. I think the shelter-in-place order was the 16th, and 2 days later we had one of our forums that we do at noon all the time, and we went online, and we had hundreds of people show up. Mm-hmm. We usually have dozens of people show up. Mm-hmm. That was a very powerful message to me. Mm-hmm. To listen to people vote that way about the validity of what we were doing and the importance of what we were doing. When you were in communication with your audience or with your customers or with your clientele, and you see and hear from them what they consider important, you have to listen to that. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. In that sense, they know best.
Excellent. Excellent. Second question, and the final question is, are there particular, what I call mindset practices that have strengthened business and industry leaders' effectiveness when pursuing equity and sustainability in terms of economic development priorities?
Particular mindsets. Talk to me about that, because I know you asked this question to a lot of people.
Yes. So oftentimes we take for granted that if we think a certain way and we have a particular goal that we've thought about, that we're going to achieve it. Mm. And certainly it's important to first think of whatever that aspirational goal is. And hopefully it's an aspirational goal and not just something that you routinely have done over and over again. But it's a goal that's almost connected to one's passion, their fantasy, so that it's aspirational. Mm-hmm. You can't leave it there. You actually have to feel it. There has to be some emotional connection to it, where it incentivizes you to get up out of the bed, to work through challenges, to push through the ridiculous nature of things as they are now, in order to experience what you want to experience. That's a mindset. Mm-hmm. That is not only what we have between our ears, in our mind, our intellectual, part of our intellectual faculties. It's also what we feel that's part of our heart sense, where mm-hmm. our passion is, our connection. So the question is, what kind of mindset has led to the kinds of equity positions, the kinds of ability to pursue economic development priorities by businesses in spite of, or even given the crisis conditions? What have you experienced in that regards?
Boy, it's interesting you say mindset, and I'm going to have to think about that, because what I have found to be the greatest impact for me is things as prosaic as a work plan and measurements, that by the end of the year, I need to see, X result, or 20 specific things done, and to break that down month by month, week by week. I'm inspired, and this is going to sound funny to people, but I'm inspired by what my friend Ryan Russo, who runs the Department of Transportation in the city of Oakland, did with his capital improvement plan. I wrote an article about it in which I noted that he had put equity in concrete. He wrote a plan that redesigned how the city of Oakland spent its paving dollars so that low-income, minority, underserved neighborhoods started to get the lion's share of the money. And he did it by going around the city and having people do a survey of every mile of road in the city to show which were the ones that were in worst condition, which were the ones that had the heaviest traffic, and started to focus on those. And to no one's surprise, the roads in worst condition and the roads that had the heaviest traffic were in the Black and Latino neighborhoods. And that's where he started spending the money, instead of spending the money in the neighborhoods where people who had political connections complained to the mayor. And it was revolutionary. He had data, and he had statistics and measurements to back it up, and to show the greater benefit for the city of Oakland. It was incredible. This is a man who believes in equity, but he did his homework. And so I think that's the message, is to do your homework, and to understand where your organization spends its money, and what are the products that your organization delivers, be they policy products or actual products, and understand how the regular daily business of your organization can be reconfigured to have an equity impact.
I love it. And what I love about it is it's a simplicity. And as you say, when you're committed to something, you just do it. You don't waste your time trying to figure out if you should do it, how you should do it, when you should do it. You just do it. And this example is a salient example of someone who came up with a decision, an ensure equity, looked at the research, or actually conducted the research, looked at the findings, and then created a plan and is implementing the plan. That's it.
Yep.
Not magical.
Yep.
And yet it can seem overwhelming when we're so emotionally charged right now.
It does. And I think what he was able to do was take that plan to the voters of the city of Oakland to show them that they had a well thought out, data-driven plan for paving. And they got Oakland to put a parcel tax on itself to pay. And so Oakland is now able to spend many times more than what it was doing before because of this. Because all of a sudden they had a well thought out and cohesive plan.
So taking what you've just shared, and we're going to wrap this up. We want to honor the 30 minutes, but we can go on for hours. But just taking what you just shared, let's take that and magnify that example on a national scale, for that matter, on an international scale. And every government of these nations on the planet ask itself, what is the bottom line? Decide on that equity bottom line, and then do the research with the right kind of research questions. Look at the findings, come up with a plan, and implement the plan. I love it. Very simple, and even with emotions. And because of the emotions, understand the powerful requirement, the need, the demand to do what's right and serves the greatest good, which is all of us. So I want to thank you, Robert. This has been meaningful discussion. You are a remarkable asset, and hopefully you'll join us in a subsequent session.
I would be honored, and I was honored for the invitation. And thank you very much, Elnora, and to the audience who I can't see, but I know you're there.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Well, I want to thank you, everyone, for joining us. And again, this is a weekly Lead Live show, Wednesdays at noon for half an hour. Sometimes we'll go beyond that, but we want to honor the half hour. You have a lot of demands on you, and we appreciate that. And yet we want to continue to inspire you and be part of the solutions that you are seeking, that you're looking for, and to remind you of your own personal genius. And within you, you already have a lot of the answers. Trust yourself, trust your intuition, go with it. Create the conditions that not only honor your health and well-being, but everyone around you. And indeed, quite frankly, when we honor our own personal health and well-being, we're really honoring everybody else. Thank you, and see you next week.